So the next session is hosted by CMS de Bakker, and the topic is greenwashing in the financial industry, lessons learned from impact managers. I would like to invite our speakers, Aurélien Hollard, partner and head of investment funds practice, Julie Pelcet, managing associate and ESG specialist, Christophe Drecher, managing partner at Enabling Capital. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for participating to our panel discussion on greenwashing, so please have a seat. Greenwashing is a very trendy topic. It is being faced by the majority of players in the financial sector. For most of them, it's a new topic as well to mitigate. And we thought, okay, what can we do to provide you some insights on greenwashing? And we thought, of course, we'll do a briefing on where do we stand on greenwashing, what is greenwashing, how EU and local regulators are tackling greenwashing risks. But we thought as well that there are players in the field which are already dealing with greenwashing since many years, and those are the impact players. And that's why I'm very happy to have on stage Christophe Drecher, who is co-founder and managing partner at Enabling Capital. Christophe has more than 15 years of experience in impact investing, and he has been involved in creating the first microfinance fund, so he has definitely a lot of experience to share with us on sustainable claims and greenwashing risk. I'm also pleased to share the stage with Julie Pelcet. Julie Pelcet is head of ESG at CMS Luxembourg, and myself, Aurélien Hollard. I'm heading the investment funds practice at CMS Luxembourg. So, as I said, greenwashing is a very trendy topic, and that's quite normal because we see more and more players entering into the sustainable investment phase and doing a lot of sustainable claims, environmental claims. When you claim to be that your product is environmentally friendly, then of course you are exposed to a greenwashing risk if you are not consistent between your claim and what you effectively provide in your product. Of course, greenwashing is now being tackled by NGOs, being tackled by EU and local regulator, the CSSF in particular. And that's why it's very important to know what is greenwashing. Is there now a common understanding of greenwashing in the European Union? Before diving into the impact investing journey with Christophe, we'll start with a short briefing on greenwashing. So please, Julie, floor is yours.
Thank you. So, as you said, greenwashing is today kind of a buzzword, but there is no regulations actually tackling this definition. So there is no binding definition within European Union. Greenwashing is actually a notion that was developed in the concept of consumers, when consumers were misled by publicity or communication. This notion was actually, was actually developed by Jay Westerveld, who was an environmentalist, and he was referring to greenwashing as the use of false, misleading, or unsubstantiated claims about the environmental friendliness of a product, service, or practice. Recently, greenwashing has been also developed in the financial sector. As I said, there is no regulations with a proper definition, but there has been some attempt of definition in regulations. So it's in the recitals of the regulation, so it's not binding, but the taxonomy for instance, define greenwashing as the practice of gaining an unfair competitive advantage by marketing a financial product as environmentally friendly, when in fact environmental standards have not been met. There is also another similar definition in the MiFID II Delegated Act, but a bit broader because it's not only related to environmentally factors, but also to sustainable, so it's also social and governance. But as mentioned before, today, since the 1st of June 2023, the European supervisory authorities actually adopted a common understanding of greenwashing. So for a bit of context, the European supervisory authorities have been asked by the European Commission to tackle greenwashing risk in the EU and to do some research and see the behaviors and how potentially we could regulate it. And so they came out with this common understanding, which is also quite broad, because it's covering practice where sustainability-related statements, declarations, actions, or communications do not clearly or fairly reflect the underlying sustainability profile of an entity, financial product, or financial services. This practice may be misleading to consumers, investors, and other market participants. So what's interesting in this definition is that we can actually see that greenwashing can be intentional and non-intentional. It can be within or outside a regulatory framework. And also, people acting as greenwasher can be, of course, the people initiating the greenwashing behavior, but also the spreaders. So we should also be aware of greenwashing behavior from third parties that we are actually spreading. In the report of the European supervisory authorities, actually there has been some really important market trend for the financial sector. So we can see, for instance, that greenwashing cases multiplied by 6.5 since 2012, that in 2022, 206 cases were related to the EU financial sector, representing about a quarter of the total of greenwashing cases. As we said before, actually most of these greenwashing cases are initiated by NGOs or consumers associations, and for now, only a few cases are actually leading to sanctions. So as the interest in sustainable investments and impact investments is growing, impact sector is also facing greenwashing risk, especially because impact investments is also a definition which is not regulated. And so the greenwashing risk is actually evolving in this sector, and we will discuss this longer together. So here are the few examples of what can be greenwashing behavior in the impact sector. So there is the exaggeration based on an unproven link between the ESG metrics and the proper impact. And there are also ambiguous impact claims as to where the impact is attributable to the investment strategy or to the investee. Also, another behavior can be the selection of wrong data or only the data that we want. So it would be cherry picking on only selecting the positive impact data and not reporting on the negative impact data. But alongside those examples, there are also good practices to actually mitigate the greenwashing risks. Some of them can be, for instance, to have the proper tools in place, to have all of the governance and the tools and the mechanism to make sure that the data that you are collecting is actually accurate or that you can spot inconsistencies between the data. Also, another good practice is to share a proper overview of the portfolio. And bad practices could be to, for instance, when collecting data, not referring to robust standards on ESG metrics. So now we will actually go deeper into greenwashing faced by the impact industry with Christophe.
Thanks a lot, Julie. So, indeed, Christophe, how did Enabling Capital communicated on its impact fund to mitigate greenwashing risk?
I think you raised a lot of valid points, Julie, because being an impact manager and advisor, being credible with regards to what we do is of utmost importance. So for us, it's not only about regulatory compliance, as you said. The regulatory part has increased in the recent times, of course, with SFDR 8 and 9 on that. But for us, we see it also from a reputational point of view, a very big one. And that's why when 2 years ago we set up an internal working panel consisting, and I think that's important, it's not only about finance, it includes portfolio management, marketing and compliance to be aligned. So the fund name must be aligned with the legal documentation, with the legal objective and the strategy. And how is this aligned? And for us, we had one tool in place and we call it the theory of change. What do we want to achieve with the fund? How do we want to achieve it? And how do we measure it? Because this will lead us later on also to the impact measure. And I think the most important one is everyone in the company must be aligned. And we use our theory of change as a I'd say as a roadmap, where do we want to go, so that everyone is aligned. And as you said, it's about communication. It's not that you can say this is greenwashing or this is not greenwashing. It's the same later on about this is impact or this is not impact. It's about transparency and communication in our point of view.
Yeah, thanks, Christophe. And what are the key challenges with greenwashing in the impact investing sector?
I think what you said, Julie, is with regards to greenwashing is a misleading statement, but this can be very broad. Greenwashing is a conduct risk, but from our side, and especially from my side, from the finance and the compliance side, I'm not so worried about the regulatory risks there. But it can happen that a stakeholder, investor, or any other party could raise an issue and claim that it's greenwashing despite having no misconduct at all. And I think that is coming back to what you raised before about the data. How can a greenwashing case come up? Even if it's only on the slide side, you are not transparent enough, you're not communicating, and you're using data on an investment case that will lead to wrong facts. We all know that in the impact field, in the ESG data field, data is not harmonized, it's not standardized. So people don't know the methodology being used. And that is part of what you need to put in place, a company-wide policies that you also put into your documentation to investors. What methodology are you using? What terms are you using? Because you can't compare one or two products and say everyone is the same. That does not work here. So being aligned, having company-wide policies in place, that is, I would say, the first step to be avoiding or minimizing the risk of greenwashing, but also taking the challenge about communication, internal one, so that people know it is a risk, but that people know where are you heading with the product, and also external communication, be transparent. Might it lead to questions from some investors? Yes, but in our experience and in my experience, it has always been very well received by investors if you are open about such things and be more proactive than you think you should be.
And a typical question for impact managers, how do you deal with the impact measurement?
Usually I would say next question, but I think impact measurement, that is the holy grail. Where everyone is talking about. Because first of all, we have seen the regulator is asking for tangible impact, tangible measurement. So about data. We all know SFDR9 as a fund status. You need to prove your KPIs, but it's not just about putting a number there, because this will put you at risk of greenwashing again, and the auditor might also have specific words. So choosing which KPI and having a direct, robust link between the engagement of the fund and the outcome you would like to achieve with your fund, that is, I would say, the hurdle everyone has in the industry. And for us personally, without our TUC, we would not have been able to tackle that one, because otherwise we would have been lost across various departments, across various ideas, because it always starts, what do we want to achieve? What kind of data is needed, and can we take it? And I think we also need to understand, even if the data might not be there, and that's why any statement you do about impact or measurement, this will improve in the next few years. So you do need to have a credible effort on a best effort basis to really see, and you have to challenge also yourself. It's not just you have a KPI in place and keep it. Yes, I do know in the SFDR9, in the fund status, you have to have KPIs, but even there you need to be flexible, because based on your challenge and what kind of data you will get, this will evolve over time. And you should also be challenged by investors. You should also be challenged internally. The data quality is getting better. You also see what the market is doing. So this is constantly changing. And for us, it was also important to be transparent and also to engage with external parties about it. And in the microfinance field, for example, there have been a lot of topics there. Is it really impact? Is it any good? Be transparent about it. We engage with 60 decibels and are really saying this might work, this might not work, and so the KPIs must be improving. So you need to start collecting the data, and I think the most important one, the golden rule of data. Don't just use any data you can get or you can collect, because you do your reporting on it. So once again, a greenwashing risk. But even if you use it only internally in your investment management decision, you would be making a decision on wrong data. So the golden rule of data and the credibility of data is of utmost importance as well.
Yeah, and all of these impact measurement, data collection has been made for many years on a voluntary basis. Now we have regulation, we have increased regulation. And how do you face potentially sometimes the inconsistency of the increased regulation with your maybe own reality as an impact manager?
That has been why I have lost all my hair due to the regulation. Because coming from a private market, private debt side, you have a gap between what the regulator requires from you. Take again SFDR9 and the principal adverse impact. In the market, we are operating in emerging market with unlisted companies. Getting this kind of data is challenging. First of all, even if you have a very good relationship with your investees, so you do get the data, it's about the quality of the data and the consistency of the data. I mentioned over lunch that we had one of our investees where we were sending out, we started with SFDR 1.5 years ago. So really robust, really testing it in the market. And one of our investees provided us data about renewable energy. And we had everything between 1 kilowatt and 1 million kilowatts. I don't know if this specific investee had a nuclear plant in the backyard, but you can't just collect the data and assume it's correct what you get. So you can choose in the worst case between sending off a questionnaire or respectively a report that is not complete, or relying on not reliable data on it. I think a compromise there is about using proxy providers. It's not practical, and that's why it's always about the idea moving forward on a best practice basis, but it gives a better assumption and way more credible in other cases. So I would say the data topic will stay a hot topic for the next 2 to 3 years for some specific markets. Of course, if it would be a listed European equity fund, it's way easier than depending on other asset classes. And coming back to impact, we have been talking a lot about the taxonomy in it, but we don't have to forget that it's all about environmental taxonomy, whereas the social taxonomy has been delayed and delayed and delayed. So for some social products, that is an issue as well. And once again, I would say the regulation is constantly developing. There is a new thing about SFDR9 where the European Commission is already evaluating, getting feedback and seeing where it is. So there will be changes coming next year. It will impact most likely the fund categorization, how many Article 8, Article 9 funds there are. But what I always say, despite I always say too many changes are happening, but you need to keep the ball moving and being credible there and drive the best. And what helped us in our industry is literally doing a sector-based approach, so working together with other players in the market. So especially a huge shout out to the Social Performance Task Force there, because if the whole industry comes together, they're facing the same issues, and coming up with a concise and stringent industry approach that helps not only the industry, but that also helps the investors, because for product comparisons.
Maybe a bonus question, because we're talking about regulation, we're talking about SFDR. Do you think that since the entry into force of SFDR, which achieves the kind of de facto classification of funds, the interest of investors for impact products has increased?
It's a tricky question. So we manage one SFDR9 and one semi-SFDR9 product, and we have not seen that investors are currently specifically preferring Article 9 or sustainable funds compared to traditional funds. Of course, it's easier for us in the impact landscape. What we have seen is that SFDR is by some institutional investors, and I think that is also a slight criticism from my side towards the regulation. SFDR has been implemented as to increase transparency and comparability for retail investors. And in my mind, this has not been achieved. If you just look at the pre-contractual template or any periodic template, if you would give this to retail investors for 2 funds and ask them to compare, they would be looking at you if you would ask them to fly to the moon. And a lot of institutional investors have been misusing SFDR, as you said, as a labeling machine, as part of a third-party fund selection tool. And this was never the idea, and should also not be the idea. We know clients, when we are in a due diligence, who are using ET data, so the European Sustainability Template data that has been done by funds. Most of them are not even aware that to some degree this is self-reported data. And so you are comparing, for example, an ESG score of a fund to an ESG score of another fund. You have no idea how this has been calculated. You don't know what underlying data has been used. So that is the danger of SFDR in that one. So it has, the idea per se is a great one, but I think it's also challenging with regards to implementation.
Yeah, and I think the risk of SFDR as it is now is also pointed out by many market players, and that's why there is as well a consultation ongoing on the reform of SFDR, and I think that can only be welcome. We still have some time ahead of us, so just maybe opening to questions from the audience, if you have any for us. Yeah, please.
Thank you. And I wanted to build up actually on this last point that you were making about SFDR originally being made as a transparency, disclosure, but the fact of being seen as a categorization, as a labeling exercise. And picking up on what Julie said about third parties engaging on greenwashing, wasn't to some extent the regulator actually providing a framework that allowed for greenwashing? So kind of a provocative question. And like you mentioned, there's some talks about moving with this consultation and having a kind of a labeling exercise like the UK is doing. So your thoughts on that? And since this is being organized by LuxFlag, how do you see the use of labeling like the LuxFlag provides to prevent the risk of greenwashing? Thank you.
So it's actually interesting what you said about how SFDR is increasing greenwashing, because it's not SFDR itself is the use that the market is doing with SFDR, but the Commission is conscious about it, so that's why they are opening this consultation, and they're with the aim that they say it, with the aim to tackle greenwashing. And their solution would be to acknowledge that the market needs and wants a label regime, and so they would want to do one with where you can actually finally tick boxes and be called sustainable or impact or whatever else label they want to. So the reform of SFDR, because SFDR actually came with a good mindset of more transparency, but the way that it's used actually shows the real market needs. And to tackle greenwashing, the solution of the Commission would be to make a proper label regime. So we'll see if it's working. And then, well, I don't know how it will go with the existing labels as LuxFlag, but LuxFlag, I mean, when you have a label regime, it's safer because you have third parties reviewing your strategy, your data, and whatever. So it is a tool against greenwashing for sure, the labels.
I think your last point is very interesting. And my question is, well, I understand the need for a European labeling system, right? But how do you see it? It's a very vast question, sorry, but how would you frame it, right? Would it be centrally managed by the legislator, or should it be like a framework in which labels that exist already, such as LuxFlag or Towards Sustainability in Belgium, would keep on existing, but just they would need to basically rely on criteria that have been set at legislative level? Because personally, well, I'm not a new policy specialist, but we do engage with EU on a regular basis, and I don't see how they could be the one like shaping this up, like really creating this label out of basically nothing. And to that extent, yeah, my point would be, I agree, we need a framework, but a framework that probably uses the expertise that is already in the market. I'd love to have your view on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant comment. I don't know, Christophe, if you have from your perspective as an impact manager, do you feel that you know, the evolution and how it goes, that the labels are something which should be expected and you know, sought for on your side?
In a perfect market, I would say no. But as investors are asking for labeling, I think having a consistent framework and defining and specific thresholds and what does it mean, the different categories, is useful. So to your first part of the question, I would answer yes, I think the market would appreciate it. If I, as a manager, would think it should come as a regulation, so coming from, let's say, agency or so on, I would definitely say no, because usually it would just be another topic for the compliance and the risk team, because it's a conduct risk, a liability risk. So in the end, I would say working with the existing labels that are available and harmonizing them, respectively putting them across Europe, it's a way better way to go. On that one, because otherwise it would also undermine the current labels. And I'm not always a friend of labels, but they have done a good job, and usually the quality is nice. But as always, one label does not fit or does not fit everyone. It's like an ESG rating from one data provider is not the same as from another one.
Yeah, no, I think it's because that's the point. At EU level, you could imagine that they could authorize officially some label agencies to provide EU label on behalf of the regulator. So that's, I think, maybe we'll need to find some pragmatic approach and see how the consultation goes, because definitely it would be difficult to see a new administration being built up from scratch with the relevant capabilities to deal with those labels. It would be, of course, a huge work at EU level. So I can imagine that relying on existing agencies like LuxFlag would certainly make sense. I don't know, Julie, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, just that's it's also what would be interesting to see in the constellations, because the Commission actually said, should we create it from scratch or use the SFDR classification? So that would be interesting to see what the market thinks as well. So yeah, it's a nice topic to follow.
Yeah, I think there is still something from the market players to say, we have involved so many resources in SFDR, please don't get rid of SFDR and try to reshape and use it to a certain extent so that all the work which has been invested by market players is still relevant for the future, but we'll see. So I think we're now over time. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Very much to all our speakers. So now we can have a short coffee break for the next 30 minutes. And please go on. So let's have a short coffee break until 4:30, and please make sure to be back on time for the remaining sessions. Thank you very much.